Well, good morning, everybody. And thank you very much for coming and starting at such an early hour after I'm sure a lot of you were out late last night. But I've got the pleasure of spending 40 minutes with you looking at the relationship challenge, or how I'd like to rephrase it, the relationship opportunity. I think in business, yes, it's about the investment challenge and what you're looking to do with it, but business is about people and it's about relationships. And what I'd like to focus on today is not just you, and yes, we are all special, but also the relationships you have with people and the special relationships and maybe the ones that aren't so special. I think with all of us, there are people that we naturally get on really well with. We just gel with them. They're easy. You have relationships that just seem to flow, clients that you love, consultants that you really understand and get on with. And then there are those other relationships where you rub up the wrong way. You just can't quite get them to understand your point. And sometimes you're not quite sure why. And what I want to spend this time on is just getting a little bit more insight into why is that? What is it about you? What is it about other people? And how can you really raise your game on that? So, what colour are you? Are you red? Are you blue? Are you green or are you yellow? The quick answer is, we're all a blend of all of them. Okay? And I know there are some people in the audience who haven't done a profile. Don't worry. You've just got to work a bit harder in the next 40 minutes than those that have. But equally, you can get feedback from some of your colleagues. I'm sure they'll tell you what they think you are, even if you're not sure what you are. Okay? And I would like to make this quite interactive. It's first thing in the morning. I know you've got a lot of other sessions going on this morning. And so for me, the more we can get some energy in the room, the more you can really think about what this means to you, I think the more value you'll get out of it. So, this work is actually based on the psychology of Dr. Carl Jung, and some of you will probably be already familiar with some of this. How many people have done an MBTI or Myers-Briggs profile? We have a wonderful. Okay. Has anyone done this type of profile before? A few. Okay. Hopefully I won't bore you, and you'll see slightly more insights than maybe you've done before. This is very similar to Myers-Briggs. It's got the same fundamental background from Jung. In my view, what makes this, I would say this is more of a strategic leadership tool in that it's not just focused on yourself, and Jung is very much about self-awareness, but where I think this tool adds more value is it helps you very quickly recognize other types who are different from yourself. And part of what I want to do this morning is help you raise your game on how do you understand a little bit more about somebody else's personality type. How do you, within 2 or 3 seconds, get a bit of a feel of, I reckon that person's probably yellow-blue, and if they are, how can I manage my communication with them and build my relationship with them so that ultimately we can have a really collaborative relationship and get the results we want? Carl Jung said, every advance, every conceptual achievement of mankind has been connected with an advance in self-awareness. And this is about self-awareness, and I'm sure in this room I've got lots of people who really know themselves. And I've noticed some of you have been reading your profiles, those of you that have got them, and I've been watching the body language of people reading them, and I think these types of things are never 100% accurate. In my experience, this one is probably a good 80% or more. And I certainly get people coming up to me and saying, well, how did you, from doing that irritating multiple choice thing on the internet, which even though I've done it several times, I find it irritating myself, it's how did it get to that report? And did you interview my wife? Or did you speak to my husband? How did they tell you that? And I think that's part of the value of this. And I'll spend the next 10 minutes explaining a bit more about how we get to that and why you are how you are in this. There are basically 4 color energies that we're going to talk about. And some of you have got cool blue blobs on your badges. The cool blue personality type is someone who typically shows no bias. They're objective, they're detached, they don't tend to give the game away. They're quite cool cookies. The earth green energy, still, tranquil, calming, soothing. I had a brilliant start to the day meeting Dave at breakfast with his cool green energy. He's very caring, very sharing, making people feel comfortable straight away is the green energy. Sunshine yellow. Life and soul often of a meeting, of a session. Cheerful, uplifting, quite spirited, quite buoyant type of personalities. And then fiery red. We've got quite a few fiery reds in this room. Very positive, affirmative, bold, assertive, know what they want, like to make things happen. Don't take too much time, don't waste my time, give me the return on investment. Now, we're all a blend of all of these, but most of us default to 2, sometimes 3 of these colour blends. If you don't have a report, I'd just like you to have a think about which one of those do you think most accurately represents you. And something I'd just like to say is, what we're looking at here is it's not about whether this is a strength or a talent of yours. It's about your personality preference. It's how you prefer to be, how you prefer to work. So we're talking about your working style, your general style. So we're not saying that you are not very good at being detached if you don't have blue. It's just you choose not to be that. So this is all our preferences. And just to link with someone in the audience earlier, we can change if we choose to change. But this is our preferred style, also default. So, what colour are you? For those of you that have a report, this is where the easy work is. If you turn to page 22 in your report, you'll see a series of bar charts. And on that page, there are 2 bar charts. And because this is a short session, I'm just going to focus on the graph that is on the left-hand side of your page. If you don't have a report, don't worry, because you can start to double-guess where you think your graph might be. The left-hand graph represents what Jung called your conscious persona. And what we mean by the conscious persona is your picture portrait of yourself. So it's how you like to be perceived by others, how you would like to come across. So it's when you're aware of your behaviors and what you're doing, it's when you're putting your best self forward. That's your conscious persona. You're consciously preferring to present that aspect of yourself to the world. And then the other graph, which we're not going to talk about in this session, but if anybody wants to speak to me in the break, you're very welcome, is what Jung talked about, the less conscious persona. That's the more instinctive you. It's still a part of your personality, but it might be one that you don't choose to show at work very often. It's that candid photograph that someone takes of you unawares, whereas the other one is more when you're ready and you're prepared and you know everyone's looking and you just present yourself how you would like to be. So this is the more instinctive piece. So today I just want you to think about your conscious persona. And to be honest, this is what most people tend to see of you when you come to work. So most of your colleagues will recognize that left-hand graph. And what I want you to look at is which of the colors are highest on the chart. Now, for some of you, like on this particular one, you'll have 3 colors above that midline that's got the 3 on it. You'll push up 3 colors. If you're pushing up 3 colors, that means that those 3 colors are the blend that people will see in your personality at work. If you're pushing up 2 colors, then they'll see a mix of those 2 colors primarily. And I know there are a few people in this audience where they've got one really powerful color that primarily is how people perceive you. So the first part of the exercise is to look at which is the one color that is the highest, which is your dominant color, okay? And I'd like you to bear that in mind for the rest of the session. And for those of you that don't have a profile, think which one you think your dominant color would be, or ask someone on your table who knows you well what they think your color would be. Right, so first of all, please can I ask all those people that have a red preference as their dominant colour, would you mind standing up, please? You don't have to stand up for long, but I'd just like the audience to see. Now, there are some people who maybe, if you haven't done a profile, but you think you might be red, could you also stand up, please? Okay, so we've got a good 30% of the audience, maybe slightly more, who've got a red profile. Would anybody like to take the red cap to represent the reds in the room? Can I? Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, if you'd like to take a seat, thank you. So, on a good day, the red profile, competitive, demanding, determined, very strong-willed, purposeful, driver, real challenging. They challenge for the best. They want the best for the client. They want the best for the organization they're representing. They don't take prisoners. They're just focused on what needs to be achieved. Could we have the blue energy people standing up in the room, please? Who's got blue as their highest preference? I think we've got a few more than that. Any more blues willing to stand? I know a blue energy person might not want to stand up because they don't really want to play this game. They're a little bit quieter. They'd rather just sit there and just not have to participate in these sorts of activities. So I apologize for putting you under pressure. But we can get a feel that there are quite a lot of people with blue energy in this room. If you wouldn't mind standing up for a little bit longer. The blue energy, cautious, very precise, deliberate, questioning. They are superb questioners. They'll really get to the core of an issue to make sure they can add most value. Very detailed. My session this morning will be very irritating to a lot of blue people because it hasn't got enough detail in it. I'm top-lining a lot of this, and they'll want a lot more of the reasoning of how does she know that, how does it get there? So I apologize. Very analytical, very structured, very good at looking at the strategy behind things, the theory behind things. Would one of the blue people be willing to wear this hat? I know it's probably most challenging for the blues, but if someone would be willing to represent the blues, thank you very much. And you can sit down now, thank you, I appreciate taking you out of your comfort zones. Linda did say, could I be a bit provocative and challenging with you? So thank you very much, thank you. Right, green energy. Could we have the green standing up? Oh, a few together over there. Don't like sitting near the front. Quite happy at the back. We've got quite a pocket over there. Yeah, we have got a... Are they clustering together a little bit? Do you think they need some mutual support of each other? Very caring, very encouraging, superb people to have on your team. They're very good at picking up the team vibe, picking up things that are unspoken, very good at setting the cultural tone for an organization, very sharing, very patient, relaxed, quite amiable people. Would you agree with that, the Greens that are standing up? It's a long way to run to get a hat, but could I have a representative of Greens, please? And you probably walk slowly and steadily, you wouldn't race anyway. Thank you very much, appreciate it. Thank you, you can sit down. And then the yellows, could I have a few of the yellows standing up? Thank you very much. Sorry to leave you to last, because I know you don't always like being the last, but I thought I'd just test you a little bit. These people who are standing up are incredibly sociable, very dynamic, very good at influencing and persuading people to do things. They're very good at understanding what's the end game, what are we really trying to achieve here, and if these people can't do it, I'd be really surprised. They often get people to do things that maybe they thought they weren't going to do, and they're very good at selling ideas. Very demonstrative, very enthusiastic, persuasive, expressive. Would I could I have a reference for the yellow hat, please? Would you mind? Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you very much. You can sit down, thank you. Now, these are qualities of you on a good day. Okay, so these are, in effect, positive qualities for the most part, but we don't always have good days. And, we all get under pressure, time pressures, difficult people, people that irritate us, people that we just can't get on with. And especially when you come across your opposite type, and we'll get into that in a minute, then some of the bad day qualities can start to come out in your personality. So, the reds hate having any negative feedback. So I'm going to start with the red so I can get that over and done with. Because if you know someone that's got a very strong red energy, you really need to choose your moment to give them negative feedback. So, bad day. I apologize before I start, but red, you're aggressive, you're controlling, you're driving, you're overbearing, and sometimes you can be totally intolerant. Now, if you have people on your team, colleagues, people you work with who have a green energy, they're the opposite to the red. So those of you who are green and all of those of you that are back over there who are green may well find someone with strong red energy on a bad day will be really powerfully those qualities that you hate. And you could find that really hard to get along with them. Let's move to yellows. Overexcitable, frantic, indiscreet. How dare they say that to that person? Flamboyant, hasty, can sometimes get so carried away with telling a fantastic story that everyone's really enjoying, that meetings run over, we go off the point a bit. It's like, come on, bring them back in. And that's particularly annoying to those of you that have a blue preference. The yellows, who can be indiscreet, over-talkative, over-passionate about things that you don't think are going to work, that can really annoy you. Greens. This is how often the reds see you on a bad day. Docile, bland, plodding, reliant, and stubborn. Someone with a green preference has incredibly strong values. And they might be quite quiet and keep things to themselves, but if you step over a value that's important to them, they will hold on to it and be really stubborn. Finally, the blue energy. Now, people with a yellow preference will see these bad day qualities in you quite a lot. Stuffy, indecisive, because you keep asking more questions. Suspicious. Why does he keep asking me that? Why is he pushing me for that? Quite cold, quite reserved. Now, it's just useful, and we're pushing the point here to make a point of which is your sort of default personality style, and how might other people perceive you if you're under pressure or if you're busy. Just starts to give you a feel, and it is those opposites that have the most challenging dynamic, but at the same time, that's where the greatest potential is. So if you are someone who's very aggressive, can be quite overbearing and red and very driven, it can be absolutely superb to go into a meeting with someone that's got a strong green preference, who's really thinking about how are people feeling here, what impact are we having, and showing that caring, sharing side to balance out the pushiness potentially of the red, depending on who the audience is. So actually, I do a lot of teamwork where you actually look at how does a team sit with this, and how can you get the most out of different personality types. But it's also when you're working with colleagues, or when you're working with consultants, clients, it's thinking about, well, how is that other person or that other group of people? What sort of preference are they likely to gravitate towards? What's my essential DNA and how I prefer to work? And do I need to modify my behavior so that I can get more out of the conversation? Those of you who work for Mercer sitting in this audience right now, that is how the split is. So 38% of Mercer people here today have that blue preference as their leading preference. 30% have red, 20% have the green, 12% have the yellow. I was quite surprised by that. I ran a session like this in Stockholm for the European Forum last September, and that split, the yellows were 32% in Mercer. So it was quite interesting to me that just to look at as a business and how you operate over here, that there's dramatically less yellow preference, but at the same time, there's a lot more green. So in Europe, there were less of the caring, sharing personalities than you actually have here in your Mercer makeup. Then we looked at people who are non-Mercer here. So the consultants, clients, that's where you get the yellows. So the majority of people who stood up with the yellow preference, a lot of those people in this audience are more consultants, clients. And for me, there's quite a big aha moment there. Because when I look at the fact there's 38% of Mercer people have a blue preference, and yet potentially a lot of your clients have a yellow preference, those are opposites. Now, there's a huge potential in that, but also you can rub each other up the wrong way, deliver slightly different messages to each other that neither of you necessarily intend, but that it could potentially create a challenge, which is why I like to call this the relationship challenge. Because if you understand that a lot of the people that you're talking to, wanting to get your ideas, your advice across to, are different from you, they might need slightly different ways of communicating. And it's not what you're saying, but it's how you're saying it, how you choose to say it, how many words you use, and how you get across to them. So for me, that was one of the biggest sort of insights from just looking very quickly at how the colours split. Just as an audience, overall, when we put the pie chart together, you can see it's slightly more evenly based. So yes, we have got slightly more blue preference people here today, followed very closely by the red, then the yellow and the green. So we are relatively balanced as an audience. Okay, here are your catchphrases. The reds, it's about doing it now. They don't want to wait. It's when you're having a meeting with them, when you're representing, preparing a report, giving some recommendations. Be brief, be bright, be gone. Don't waste their time. You might feel that they need more detail. If you're a blue preference person, you'll want to give them all the detail, all the analysis, this is why we came up with this. They don't want that first. They want, give me the top line. I just want the 3 key elements that are most important here. They might want the detail later, but primarily, they want the top line. You need to be brief. So if you know that you're working with people who've got a really strong red preference, less is more. They can always ask you for more, and then you can provide them more. And so part of your challenge, if you're any of the other colours, is to look at what you were going to say and then think, what are the 3 key things here? And just share those. However much you might want to give everything else, don't, if you really want to get on with reds. People with a strong yellow preference want to be involved. They hate not knowing, they're not in the in crowd. They hate not knowing what's going on. They hate not being involved in something. They want to be involved. They want to do things together. If you've got people on your team or working with you who have strong yellow preference, you'll get much more out of them if they're working in a team or working with people than if you leave them to do it by themselves. They're very good at working very, very well with lots of other different personality types. The green preference, if you've got a meeting and you know that a lot of the people in that meeting are strong green preference, don't just start the meeting with, here's the agenda, these are the outcomes, this is the results we want to do, let's get on with it. It's like, how are you? Did you have a nice weekend? Would you like a cup of tea? Can I get you a water? They need some of that touchy-feely show you care. And once you've shown you care, then they'll be very happy to engage in the conversation. Those with the blue preference, give me the detail. If you really waffle and tell a story and you're not actually giving them the detail, they'll be so irritated with you, they'll really stop listening. They want to do it right. So they want the detail to make sure the advice they give, the recommendations they're making are 100% right. So if you want to influence someone with a blue preference, make sure you give them as much detail as possible. You might want to send them a report before the meeting, give them a chance to analyze it, look at it, give them more detail than you maybe want if you're one of the other colors, because they'll need that, and then you can have a very productive conversation with them. So that's just a little bit more about the top line on each of the colors. Now, for those of you that have got a report, I think this picture is on page 21. Please correct me if I'm wrong. 21. Now, what we've done here is we've taken those bar charts and made a little pie chart of your of the color breakdowns. Now, in this Insights profiling system, you are one of 72 different types. So there are 72 different numbers on there. They're not all sequentially numbered, and there is a reason, but I haven't got time in this presentation. I'm sorry for those with the blue preference. I'm not going to go into the detail around why the numbers are how they are. But if you want to know later, I can tell you. So you are one of 72 different types, and your blob is on one particular type. Now, for quite a lot of you, you'll have two colored blobs. The brightly colored blob refers to your bar chart on the left-hand side that we were looking at before, which is your conscious persona. And then the paler colored blob represents your less conscious persona, the right-hand chart that we haven't really discussed. So for the purposes of the rest of the session, I'm going to talk about your brightly colored blob. Some of you will only have one blob, and that's because both of them are one on top of the other. Okay? And there are reasons for that, but I'm not going to explain them in this session. Now, some of your blobs will be on the inner circle, some of them will be in the middle circle, and some will be on the outside. If you just look at your brightly colored blob, for those of you whose blob is on the inner circle, that's because you're pushing up 3 colors. So people in the world of work will see all those 3 parts of your personality when you're engaging with them. For those of you that are in the middle ring, that's called a classic personality type. You're pushing up 2 colors. And for those rare people who are only pushing up 1, that's because you've got one very strong color that people primarily see in you all the time. Okay, so we're just looking at the one brightly colored blob, and I'd just like you to look at where it is in the circle, and then I'm just going to refer a little bit more to why it's sitting there. First of all, when Jung was looking at personality preferences, and this is something most of you will be familiar with, and if you've done Myers-Briggs, you'll know this, is he looked at an introvert preference and an extrovert preference. Now, if your blob is on the left-hand side, if you draw a line straight down, you're an introvert preference person. And if your blob is sitting on the right-hand side of that ring, you've got an extrovert preference. So those of you who are introvert preference, so who are leading with your blue and your green, you are quite quiet and observant. You tend to have an inward focus. You get your energy from being by yourself. You might quite like coming to these events, but actually they're draining. They can be draining over a period of time, and you need to take some time out to get some space for yourself. Or just sitting on the plane today with somebody you don't know and just being able to recharge your batteries. People with an introvert preference, they get their energy away from other people. Whereas people with an extrovert preference get loads of energy from being at an event like this, mixing with people and being with other people. So again, it's just mindful of different personalities and how people default and what can bring out the best in them. So those of you who are on the right-hand side, your blob, either the red or the yellow preference, you're very energetic in terms of personality types, outward focused, very quick, action-orientated. You can be quite outspoken and bold and often think before you speak, or speak before you think. And be mindful of that, because those of you who've got that sort of green or blue preference, who are more introvert, you'll really think things through before you say something. Whereas people who've got a red or a yellow preference will just say what they think straight away, and then they might change their mind 2 minutes later. Okay, which could be really irritating to someone who's a blue preference, who's been thinking it through for a while and has thought of all the repercussions and the combinations and then come out with what they think's right. Someone with a red or a yellow will just seem to be holding 1.1 minute and then they'll change their view onto something else the next. So it's just knowing that there's a difference there and there's a value in that difference. I'm about to fall silent for an hour or two. Nothing personal. Remember that people with an introvert preference need some personal space. And for those with a red or a yellow preference, you might think, have I irritated them? Have I upset them? Often you really haven't, but they just need that space to be quiet. On the other hand, great, fantastic, let me tell you my life story again. They love to talk. There were probably a lot of people last night in the yellow, red areas who are very gregarious, really want to talk, life and soul. They're great people to have in meetings at the right time for the right reasons. So just being aware that different people can wind different people up without even meaning to. How do you recognize these people? Now, if you really look at this, if we think of introvert and extrovert, people who have an introvert preference, they don't really like you touching them. It's, they might sort of have a shake hand, but they're quite formal. It's like, don't give me a big hug. And against an extrovert preference, they might have much more body language. I've got an extrovert preference, so I use my hands a lot and I move around a lot. Whereas introvert preference, they'll probably be stand by the lectern, wouldn't necessarily move too much, have their notes, and they just want to make sure that they get the right things across and they're very accurate. Whereas I'm out here because I've got an extrovert preference and I'm moving around and I might change what I was thinking I was going to say because something else comes into my mind and it feels better than what I planned. So it's quite different. So just watching how people are. And it's quite easy once you get this to start recognizing that person's probably an introvert preference. They want some time to think something through before they'll give me a solution. Therefore, I'll give them a bit of preparation time. Whereas someone with an extrovert preference who thinks on their feet, they don't want to be bored with loads of detail and big reports before a meeting. And if you give them the big reports before a meeting, they probably won't even read them. But then they'll get to the meeting and they might be flicking through, but then they'll just think on their feet in the meeting. Something else that Jung talked about was thinking and feeling. Now, some people, their preference is to think first and feel second. And other people in this room will feel first and think second. Now, when you're on your blob on the circle, those of you who've got a blob that's in the top semicircle, if you look at the horizontal line, if your blob is at the top, so if you're either blue preference or red preference, then you think first. So you'll straight away think through the repercussions of things. You're quite formal, can appear quite impersonal, very analytical, detached, objective, competitive, task-focused into the systems of things. Okay? But those of you with a feeling preference, whose blob sits underneath in the bottom semicircle, you have a feeling preference. So straight away it's, how do I feel about this? Not what do I think of this? How do I feel? How does it make me feel? How might other people feel? So they tend to be more informal, more personal, more considerate. They can be quite accommodating. They want people feel good. They're very harmonious people. Relationships are important. They're more relationship-focused naturally, whereas the thinkers are more task-focused naturally. So again, it's just noticing if I'm a thinker and I go straight into task and I go straight into action, or am I a feeler and I feel things first? And if you are a thinker and you've got a lot of feeling people in your team or you've got feeling colleagues that you need to really win over, don't just override people's feelings because your brain is computing all the thinking. It's just remembering what's important. Now listen up. we're going to do this alphabetically. It's like, let's get some process in here. Let's just think this through. Let's just make this work. Let's get the task done. Calm down, Edna. Yes, it's some giant, hideous insect, but it could be some giant, hideous insect in need of help. They put other people before themselves, often the people with a feeling preference. How do you start recognizing people? Well, you'll notice often from verbal style. The people with the thinking preference, they're quite controlled. Their speaking is quite controlled. They won't necessarily give away much emotion. They could be even speak in a monotone way. They don't intend to, but because they're in their head and they're thinking, they can be charge neutral a lot of the time in the way they speak. Quite businesslike, question quite a lot, can be quite critical as perceived by people who've got a feeling preference. They can even be quite blunt. Whereas people with a feeling preference, they tend to verbally be a bit more relaxed about how they present themselves. They definitely tend to present with more emotion, more expression. They can be quite animated, especially if they're more on that yellow side. And they will ask questions, but they can sometimes make it quite personal, whereas the thinkers are much more straight on the business. So you'll notice from how people speak. So just in summary of what I've spoken about, the 38% of you in this audience who have the cool blue preference, you've got a combination of you're introverted, but you're an introverted thinker. So you want to go away and you want to think about things. You've got a very task-focused style, and under pressure, you can be very thoughtful but very objective about things. Your opposite type, the yellow, is an extroverted feeling type. So they're very much about being sociable, being considerate for other people, still action-orientated, but they're very entertaining. Those of you with the fiery red, and there's a lot of you in the audience with the fiery red, you're extroverted thinking people. You enjoy high activity. You can achieve a huge amount when you're in the flow. You're very good at working with other people because you're an extrovert, but you're very logical and working with the facts because you're a thinker. Your opposite type, the green, is that introverted feeling personality. And you're into depth. You're into meaning, reflection, harmony. Let's get consensus. Very collaborative in the way that you work with people, taking in lots of different combinations of things that are going on. So it's just being mindful of that. Now, we've got quite a few people in this audience who have very fascinating profiles from my point of view, because you have your first colour is directly opposite to your second. Now, we call those creative types. And what I've noticed just quickly looking at some of the profiles is there's quite a few people, it's unusual in this sort of audience, who've either got they lead with blue, but then they've got yellow as their second. Now, that's quite rare because often, if you lead with blue, you'd have red as your second, because the blue and the yellow are different. They're very different. But I think that's where you really add versatility in your relationships. If you've got two opposing colours as your number one and your number two, you can appear to your colleagues as quite maverick. Because if you've got the blue and the yellow, I'm just using that as an example, the blue is very attention to detail, very focused, very analytical, and then the yellow is very gregarious and very chatty and very persuasive, and they're very different personality types. But those few of you in the audience who blend those two, that's a real unique quality, talking about special at the beginning. So I think for some of you, if you have those two, and it might be useful to share that with colleagues afterwards, I think there's a real benefit in having people like that in your team. There aren't so many with the red-green combination, but there's a few of you with the blue-yellow. So let's get into the nitty-gritty then. The person with the red hat, would you just mind standing up for a minute? Thank you. If you are communicating with this gentleman, be direct and to the point. Focus on the results and the objectives. Be brief, be bright. be gone. Do not hesitate or waffle. It will drive him mad. Don't focus on the feelings. Don't do the soft, fluffy stuff. And don't try to take over his meeting. Now, I'm pushing a point here because I don't know what's your second colour? Yellow, okay. So the yellow will give him a bit more flexibility in that. But just to push a point, and there are a lot of people in this audience that lead with the red, if you really want to get them to buy in and build your relationship with them and increase your collaboration with them, then be direct. Don't hesitate, don't waffle, give them the top line, and then leave them to ask questions. Thank you. Please, could I have my yellow representative? Thank you. So, if you have someone who's yellow on your team or a colleague that you're dealing with, be friendly and sociable because that is very important to them. Be entertaining and stimulating. Be open and flexible. Do not bore yellow people with too many details because they cannot bear it. Okay? So don't give her too much detail. Don't tie her down with routine. It might suit you if you have a blue preference, but yellow preference people like freedom. They like to be able to create their own agendas. Don't ask them to work alone, though. So friendly, sociable, no detail or minimum detail. If she needs more detail, she'll ask you. But just allow her to be entertaining, stimulating, and coming up with fantastic ideas because she could really help drive a business forward. Thank you. Green preference. Can't remember what, there's my green hat. Thank you very much. Be patient and supportive. Often, it's the people with the green preference in business who are most overlooked. And they can potentially add more value in a meeting, in an interaction, than especially the people with the red preference would realise. And it's often the people with the green that might contribute last in a conversation, but their contribution is really valuable. And the reds will talk a lot, they'll have lots of views and opinions, and they'll be in there competitively bouncing ideas off each other. And the person with the green preference could have a fantastic idea, but you don't give them space to speak. You need to give them space. You need to ask them what they think, because often what they think can be really valuable. Slow down and work at their pace. You need to ask their opinions. They don't always find the space in a meeting or a conversation to give their opinion. Give them the space to tell you, and give them the time to answer. Don't take advantage of their good nature. The green personality will put up with a huge amount, and you'll think they're really easygoing, they're incredibly loyal. They're the first people to walk out of a marriage if they feel they're being taken for granted. They could leave your business as a loyal person who's worked for you for years if over time you really take them for granted. And don't give them last-minute surprises. Thank you. Finally, the highest percentage of people in this room, those blues. Could I have my blue person, please? Thank you. If you want to get the most out of your relationships with, sorry, I don't know your name? Colette. If you want to get the most out of your relationships with Colette, you need to be well prepared. You need to be thought through. Give her things in writing. Give her documents, give her reports, give her a presentation. Let her consider the details, ideally before the meeting. Don't get too close. Don't hug her unless she knows you really, really well, because she really won't be comfortable with that. Don't be flippant on things that she might think are important, and don't change her routine without notice. So it's give her the detail, really think it through, and then allow her the time to analyse it, because she'll be incredibly proficient at analysing things and computing things and giving you the strategy that you want. Thank you. So my final slide, adapting and connecting. Those of you with blue energy, your challenge is to do it with passion. Now, passion probably isn't a blue word, but if every single person in this room who's got a blue energy could just up the ante on their passion, their enthusiasm around what they're doing, you know your stuff. You're incredibly clever at what you can recommend and what you can consult with people. But do it with a bit more enthusiasm and passion, and you'll find that you'll engage more people. The challenge for the red people in this meeting today is do it with grace. You might want to think, what does that mean? But do it with a bit of grace. And those of you who've got a green preference can talk to you about that in the break. Those of you who've got the yellow, be focused. You might have huge dreams, huge visions, lots of ideas. Focus. And those of you who are green, and increasingly we're seeing more green people moving up into senior leadership positions, your challenge is do it with power. You know your stuff. Step into your power because you can make a huge difference in the organizations that you're working with. So don't hide your light under a bushel. Be powerful. Thank you very much for your time.